Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, the man in triple black, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
That's right. Welcome to Sovryn Tech. Of course, you are joined by Brian Sovryn. And today I am so excited that I have two really just two of the most wonderful ladies, not only in Liberty, but also, in my opinion, in Bitcoin. Of course, I am being joined by a guest that I'm often joined by, which is the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
And I have Cathy Reisenwitz with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, this is great. Now, I want you to introduce yourself, Cathy, but before you do, I'm going to say where I first heard about you, and that was I read a blog post by Tom Woods, who is a pretty famous guy in Liberty circles, and he wrote a blog post, I think that engaged in a degree of maybe slut shaming. I think that's pretty fair to say.
Social conservatism.
Social conservatism, definitely. And then someone I think he was, Cathy, maybe you can correct me on this. Was it Julie Borowski that he was defending?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it was.
When she put out her video that said there are no women in Liberty because the women's magazines are feminist liberal propaganda.
Right, that's it.
Sex, butts, and orgasms. And
yeah,
Cathy had a
that's
great
the
response.
one. Sex, butts, and orgasms. Exactly. And then, Cathy, you did a response video to that, and it was fantastic. I heard that, and I said, this is great. Finally, someone out there saying, no, all this is okay.
Yeah, Brian and I actually watched that video together when we first saw it. And that was the first we had ever heard of you. And we were literally both like cheering you on, like, yeah, go, Cathy, you tell him.
That makes my life.
Yeah, it was great. So, but Cathy, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us, all the projects you do. I mean, because you are a pretty prolific writer, and you do plenty else.
I did. I kind of burst on the scene a little bit with some videos I did with a show I created with my co-host or my producer, Sean Malone, called The Libertarian Show. So that was our first video, and probably my greatest accomplishment in life was ranking #1 for sex butts and orgasms on Google. That was pretty fun. So I kind of started sexandthestate.com, which is my blog, to have a place where I collect all the things that I was doing. I've been writing since 2009. My first blog was an anarcho-capitalism blog. And now I am a editor for Young Voices, which is kind of a PR outfit for young millennials who want to get published and get their voice heard on the issues of the day. And then, again, I write for Sex and the State, and also I write regularly for Bitcoin magazine.
Oh, fantastic. And now I've recently seen you, were you on Vice Motherboard? I think you did.
I got published in Vice, and
that is fantastic.
That was a great article.
It was so much fun. And it's so funny because I've pitched Vice so many sex articles, but I guess they're just, the market has more supply than demand in that area. But I published one on, banking regulations, and boom, published. So, who knows? But yeah, that was really.
Well, you're being modest, Cathy, because your article was called something like, "Why do local Bitcoin sellers get put in jail when big banks walk free?" or something like that. And I thought it was great. It was about the concept of, the non-crime of money laundering, so-called, and how these regulations are just built so that everybody breaks them and they're not actually committing any crimes by doing something like changing Bitcoins into dollars or vice versa, right?
Right, exactly. And as the crazy anarcho-capitalist, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to make the point that victimless crimes really shouldn't be. But sometimes the government makes your point for you. And I think the fact that in the case of money laundering, the more you break the law, the bigger your infraction, the less likely you are to actually get punished, kind of makes the case for us that these laws are really a lot more, problems than they're worth.
Sure. And I mean, what a huge sounding board to get that kind of message out. I mean, Vice is a big, big deal. And I agree. Yeah, it was just a fantastic article.
I'm curious, how was the response to that?
It was, I mean, massive. It definitely blew up on Twitter. The biggest thing that I liked about it was that Vice is big, but it's more importantly not preaching to the choir. I mean, these are not libertarians that are reading this.
Oh, yeah. That is very important.
Anytime I can get out of the libertarian, echo chamber world, which I love and is my home, but, obviously I want to convert. So to get those ideas out there to a more mainstream audience, or just a different audience who's interested in tech but isn't necessarily steeped in arguments against money laundering laws, for instance, is just a lot of fun. And a lot of people were really into it and were just like, these are some outrageous facts, and so they were interested. And it definitely had the whole social justice angle, where you've got a 24-year-old entrepreneur sitting in a jail cell and huge bankers walking free. So it was really fun.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with you on reaching out beyond just the Liberty circles. As great as they are, like you said, it's your home. I know, Stephanie, you've recently said that was kind of your interest, is in reaching out to people, into events that aren't necessarily Liberty oriented.
Yeah, I'm with Cathy 100% on that. I mean, I was kind of thinking about it from a Bitcoin angle.
Sure.
Recently, I gave a couple talks to Bit Curious, I like to call them. Bit Curious, or newbies, people who weren't too familiar with Bitcoin. Maybe they knew what it was, but they, had never used it or anything. And just giving those talks and hearing the questions that people asked and how interested they were really inspired me to want to do more of that, instead of sort of engaging in the circle jerks of going to libertarian and Bitcoin conferences where everybody already knows everything about Bitcoin.
Right.
And they're all trying to prove that they've got the biggest, Bitcoin wallet.
The wallet measuring contests.
Yeah, there you go. Well, as I always say, you don't need a circle to jerk it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, bringing up Bitcoin, Cathy, I've noticed recently you've been doing a lot of write-ups on cryptocurrencies, and I'd love to find out how you got involved in Bitcoin for a few reasons, because one of the things that I've had to rail a lot on in Sovryn Tech is that there's been really some very insulting pieces towards women that are involved in Bitcoin. There was a video that was popular that came out of Las Vegas that
I wouldn't call that popular, but
yeah, maybe not popular, maybe notorious. I don't know. Where it just had tried to make the women at the event look stupid. And I had a real problem with that.
Not just that, they used footage of women who clearly didn't want to be interviewed. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't care whether they wanted to be on camera or not. They were just trying to shove the camera in their face, and it was totally obvious.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then obnoxious.
Yeah, and then you had a whole bunch of MRA types just like saying, "See what I mean? See what I mean?" And I think this is just absolute nonsense. And it's so good to read material from people that completely dispel that whole notion. Certainly, Stephanie, you do that. That
video definitely was not helping the problem of few women in Bitcoin, but I think people like Cathy are helping the problem for sure.
Exactly. So, Cathy, if I'd love to hear, how did you get involved with cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in general?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jeffrey Tucker, who is so amazing. I love that man to death. I don't know if people are familiar with him, but he's a speaker, an author, a best-selling author, and anarcho-capitalist, just an amazing guy, a mentor to me. He said, "Cathy, you've got to get into this Bitcoin thing." And so I was like, yeah, okay. And then he said, "Cathy, get on Facebook video chat, download this wallet, and put your screen up. And I'm going to send you through a QR code some Bitcoin." I was like, well, okay, sure. This isn't going to cost me much time. So I did. And then he said, "Cathy, I'm going to create a cryptocurrency conference. I've never put on a conference before, and I've not been in Bitcoin that long, but I'm going to make it happen. And do you want to speak at it?" And I was like, well, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I'd love to hang out with you in Atlanta and go to this conference with you.
Did his bow tie start spinning?
He's on the phone, but no doubt. So I was like, well, if I'm going to speak, I guess I better learn something about it. So I started to look into it. And, I've been in ANCAP, like I said, since at least 2009. And so the more I learned about it, the more, I was still obviously, and I still am, intimidated by the technical aspects of it. But I'm, intrigued is not the word. I mean, I'm just obsessed with the implications for freedom, for prosperity, for innovation, for voluntarily sidestepping the state. And so that was kind of the point of my talk. And so I did the talk, and then I wrote a few more things about Bitcoin in the interim. But again, the intimidation factor kept me from really diving in. And then my friend Jason King of Sean's Outpost, who's putting on the Bitcoin in the Beltway conference, invited me to speak
great
at that.
Guy.
Oh, I mean, amazing. He's running across America to raise money for the homeless right now. Just an amazing guy. And his campaign in Florida to shame the, I believe it was the city council members who had banned homeless people from covering themselves with blankets, apparently worked. I mean, he created like memes while he's running across America to shame the council members into changing the law, and it looks like it's working. But anyway, so he asked me to speak at this conference, and then as part of that to go to a local Bitcoin meetup in DC to kind of make an announcement, gauge interest, make sure people in the DC area are aware of the conference coming up. And so I went, and I'm just talking to people, and I'm just reinvigorated. I'm just like, this is a wonderful community of people. This is a really exciting thing. I've got to get into it. And so I learn about things when I have to write about them. That's just how I do. And so I asked Elizabeth Plauché at Bitcoin Magazine, hey, can I write for you regularly? And she said, sure, go ahead. And so I've been writing at least weekly since then for Bitcoin Magazine and for Vice. And the more I get into it, the more excited I get, and the more I want to learn more about it.
Sure. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, going back to the woman problem, it's interesting for me because most of the events that I've gone to, I've been introduced as like a speaker or, someone with an announcement to make. So I feel like I've been kind of shielded from some negative assumptions that other people might make about other women at Bitcoin meetups.
Sure.
I've always been treated really, really well, but that isn't to say that there aren't problems. I've been in the tech community for a long time. I started in search engine optimization, actually. And, it was always the one conference where the restroom line for the women's restroom was super short and for the men's was really long.
Yep.
And, the tech community has some issues. It's got some MRAs in it. It's got some issues where, men who aren't used to dealing with women in a professional capacity aren't good at it yet. I don't think Bitcoin is especially bad, but I do think that, when we talk about women's experiences at Bitcoin meetups and sexism in the community, it's not to beat up on it. It's to say, hey, this is a problem. Let's do something about it. Let's actively engage in making this community more attractive to women, or at least not hostile, because that's excluding half the population. And if we want cryptocurrency to catch on, we're going to need women.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with every sentiment there. It's interesting, too, that I think, you're mentioning how you wanted to reach out beyond libertarian circles, beyond liberty circles, and Bitcoin really allows for that. Because everybody seems to be into Bitcoin, and they never, in fact, I heard one from a friend who was at a meetup in Philadelphia, and the friend said that a person walked up to him and said, with this whole Bitcoin thing, I don't think we need the Fed. And this is a guy, who just never even, these concepts never came to him before.
I was just picturing the Keanu Reeves meme.
Yeah, right. Whoa. So yeah, it's really a great way to do that outreach. And that's really interesting what you say about in the tech field. About women, and everybody seems to kind of realize it. Even the men seem to have an understanding that, hey, how come there aren't more people involved? I guess it's changing. It's getting better. Mm-hmm. You get highlights like Marissa Mayer, at Yahoo, becoming, the CEO years ago now. But so your experience though in general at conferences you haven't really felt any you mentioned hostility, but you say you're not really feeling any kind of hostility towards women at those.
I've never experienced anyone seeming the least bit dismissive or sexist of me. My experience is admittedly limited, and like I said, I showed up kind of as a speaker, so There wasn't the whole "oh, whose girlfriend are you" problem with me. And just in general, it's just not really been a problem for me. Even at SEO conferences, people were generally like, "Oh, yay, a woman," if anything.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there isn't, a problem in the community. I know and it's mostly online where I've seen, Reddit threads and, Bitcoin forum threads that were full of, sexist jokes and derisive comments and things like that. And like I said, I don't want to beat up on the community. I don't think it's especially bad, but there is a problem with sexism in tech, and to pretend like it's not so leaves the opportunity to get better on the table.
Have you ever experienced kind of some of the passive stuff? Like, for example, I've had a number of experiences on local Bitcoins where I had kind of a gender neutral username, and people would message me, and invariably it would start with, "Hey man, hey bro," or "Hey dude." Like they just assumed that I was a guy.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, 99% of the time they're right, because if they message a random person on local Bitcoins, then it's going to be a man. But just in my case, they weren't. So I just thought that was kind of funny how people made that assumption.
It is. And it's kind of like, well, you don't want to make a deal of it, but then yeah. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, Cathy, I'm curious, like, how did you get into the world of feminism, or I don't know what word you use, but like, you certainly write a lot and you care a lot about women's issues and gender issues and all that kind of stuff. I mean, how did you get into that? It's kind of an unlikely marriage with somebody who's a libertarian, and actually, there's been a lot that's written and talked about in the liberty community where people are actually very hostile to anything that they might perceive as feminism.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even I experienced that, and I'm just a guy who likes to use that term, to describe myself as a feminist. And people get downright hostile.
Right.
Yeah, they believe that I don't know, that you want to impose your will on them or something, or that you want to use the state to oppress them. And even when you say, no, I don't want to, I want people to be treated equally, they still kind of assume you're like this short-haired dyke who hates men and you've never shaved your legs and so forth. So, like, how did you get interested in feminism? I'm really curious about that.
Well, it's important to know that I've always been kind of a weirdo. I grew up Southern Baptist, but I read...
That is important.
It is. It's very important. I read Bitch and Bust magazine at the same time I was going to my Southern Baptist church. And I just found the topic interesting from a young age. And I identified with, hey, sexism is a problem. Egalitarianism is important. I didn't really start writing about it until I was thinking about, okay, I'm a marketer, right? That's why I did SEO. That's what I started my career at, and I'm still doing that in a way now. We've got a great product here, economic freedom. I mean, this is it. This is the only way we can, create more prosperity, create more wealth, make sure more people have the opportunity to do what they love instead of what they have to do to stay alive.
Sure.
How do we market it to people who have traditionally ignored us, which includes women, especially single women, have been traditionally just either ignorant of or hostile to free market ideas. And so I started to think about that marketing problem. And as I began to research ways to make liberty more attractive to single women, which consisted mainly of reporting on the ways in which the state is particularly oppressive to women, of which there is no end.
Yeah.
I started to get familiar with, Twitter feminism and intersectionality and egalitarianism and privilege and, things like that. And
that is a scary word for a lot of libertarians. They hate when you say privilege.
Oh my gosh, yes.
They kind of curl up into a ball and shrivel up and die when
just
you say
the
that.
rage. The idea that they might have any advantage based on identity is just overwhelming. And that rage is, really unattractive to people for whom that's just understood.
Right.
And so it's a problem, and it's something that I believe that the liberty movement, that free market ideas as such are going to have to overcome that branding problem if we're going to find any purchase with the people who have traditionally ignored us.
Yeah, I agree with you completely.
Well,
and just also from the, the stuff. Well, I was just going to say from the Southern Baptist perspective, growing up with a lot of, fear and shame around sex, really, when I found sex positive feminism, I thought, here is a really great kind of synthesis of kind of the best parts of social libertarianism, feminism, all these things combined into this, let's take the shame and fear out of sex and celebrate it, as opposed to, fearing it and shaming people for it. So that was another aspect that really drew me to feminism.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you there. I mean, in fact, it's one of the things, especially, which is one of the things that makes, your writing in general really refreshing, Cathy, is that I found when I came to liberty, that there was still so much like conservatism and still so much shaming, especially around sex, certainly around social issues, which I do want to touch on more. But that's one of the reasons I felt like compelled to do a podcast, is I wanted to do something that was just so uncensored, where people could literally just say whatever they wanted to say, talk about things, and that there wasn't shame around it.
And you would single-handedly destroy social conservatism. That was
I would do my best.
Statement of Sovereign Tech.
I would do my absolute best.
The Lord's work.
That's right.
She can pull that off because she's got the little Southern twang.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, I mean that's really great. I mean, how do you feel about? Did you feel that in general? Have you experienced like a serious sex negative reaction to any of your work?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the SoCon butthurt is just amazing. I was shocked. Like, I'm still shocked about how concerned people are with the ability to shame other people for their consensual actions, for their cooperative behavior. It's amazing and really, really unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, the way I kind of refer to it is fusionism. So it's the fact that libertarian ideas have found more of a home with conservatives than with liberals. And so a lot of libertarians have, kind of tolerated or just ignored some of the, what I call social central planning of a conservative ideology.
Yeah.
And I think it's really...
I like the way you phrase that. Go ahead.
I think it's really, really unfortunate just from a personal perspective, because I don't think that's the best way to live. But even more importantly, again, if we're trying to sell free market ideas to the next generation, tying them to social conservatism is a deadly mistake, I think. And so it's up to today's libertarians, if they want to, have any kind of relevance or, moral authority or, any kind of attention even from young people going forward, to fight fusionism, to divorce free market ideas from social conservatism, and to, aggressively question that social central planning.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful, because exactly. Slow clap. Because seriously, especially the up and coming generation, conservatism just does not resonate with them at all. I don't feel. And to try and just push that down their throat is going to turn them off instantly. Not to say that the state is giving it that much of a better, answer or doing a better selling job. They're doing a terrible job, especially now, because thanks to technology, they really can't lie that much anymore. I mean, they can lie, but they can't get away with it.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. But now, so that leads me to my next question, in that, because you talk a lot about privilege, social privilege, class privilege, and it's interesting that even young people, and you probably have far more direct experience with this, Cathy, young people do seem to not, like, they want to, the common libertarian answer is to just get beyond it. Like, pretend race doesn't exist.
We're all individuals, so
right.
We don't even have to talk about the idea of racism or anything like that, because we'll just pretend it doesn't exist because we're all individuals.
Right. And they want to go past it. They want to push, they love to quote Ayn Rand in this case, not to say Ayn Rand's, I like a lot of Ayn Rand's work, but they want to push that line where the smallest minority is the individual. Is that it? Right.
Yep.
But if my opinion is, if you just ignore these things, you can't get past them if you ignore them. It's not possible. So I feel like
sometimes there can be really like self-limiting beliefs wrapped up in that too. Like if you don't take the time to pick apart, like, hey, no matter what my gender is, right? What was expected of me because of my gender, and how is that holding back my freedom from doing things that I want to do in life? That's a really important question to ask, and it's part of personal freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but I do seem to see that there are a lot of young people who are just at that point, like I said, where they want to just pretend it doesn't exist and just like move on. What do you say? How do you address that sort of thing, Cathy, in your writing?
I think I've done it less well in my writing and better just kind of in my speaking. And what I kind of try to explain to people is that privilege is just the acknowledgement that there are certain things that you can't know on the basis of who you are. And really what I mean by that is I can't know what, gender-based discrimination against men is like. I don't know. I've never experienced it. I can't know what homophobia is like. And so for me to get that information, for me to understand the oppression that that people with these identities face, I'm going to have to be proactive and seek that information out. And that we as libertarians, we've got to acknowledge the fact of privilege before we can be credible when we say that we are going to offer liberation for everyone, right? So how can we address things that are limiting, like racism, sexism, homophobia, if we don't acknowledge they exist? And if you acknowledge that these things exist, that someone's identity shapes their experience, well, then you're acknowledging privilege, and that's all it is.
Right. Wow. Well said.
I noticed there was nothing in there about it being someone's fault that they are white or that they're male or that they're straight or that they should feel guilty for being born a man or a white man or whatever. Right.
No. And that's the difference between what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to combat. I'm not trying to introduce new suffering, new shame, new problems into the situation. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take the reality of the situation, which is that oppression exists and that it's often based on identity. And once you acknowledge the problem, then you can begin to posit real solutions to it. Then you can begin to say, hey, maybe we should have harm reduction instead of the world's largest prison population, which is overwhelmingly Black and Hispanic. Hey, maybe we should have school choice instead of trying to force people to go to different schools via buses. Maybe we should have equality under the law instead of sodomy laws, which are used to victimize gay people. But how can we get there if we don't acknowledge that these problems exist in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. And a point I like to bring up often enough is that just because you're, say, pro something, doesn't mean you're anti, its opposite. Like just because, you're interested in, and say you're making comments or sticking up for, lack of a better word, women's rights or gay rights, take your pick.
Sure.
Doesn't mean that you're against straight people or against men. And it's a fine line. And I still haven't figured out how to communicate in whichever form, writing, speaking, whatever. I haven't figured out how to really communicate that without it somehow sounding like a judgment. Have you figured out any tricks on how to, like maybe, I don't want to say tricks, that's a bad word to use. Have you figured out any useful tools, strategies to communicate the really a wonderful message that you have there to people without it coming off as judgment, or do you get a negative reaction?
Well, Oscar Wilde said, if you want to tell people the truth, make them laugh. Otherwise, they'll kill you. So
there you go. Nice.
Try to do that. I think what I'm trying to do with libertarianism is to indicate that libertarians are people with some amount of moral credibility. And what I mean by that is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? Libertarians have generally seemed to be either hostile to or ignorant of the unique problems that people who are not, who don't identify as straight, white, middle-class, well-educated males face. And so what I'm trying to do personally is to do the same, to show that I care about people and that I'm concerned with their unique problems, and like you said, it's hard to find somebody who loves straight, white, middle-class, well-educated men as much as I do. I love them, but unfortunately, our movement is, made up of that demographic, and that as a demographic, as a percentage of the population, is declining. And so if we want any kind of relevance going forward, we need to have a broader appeal. And so I think it's unfortunate that anyone would think it's us versus them, that to make other identities and what appeals to them and what's interesting to them and the unique challenges that they face a priority is somehow, anti the people who are already in the movement.
Right.
So I'm just trying to overcome, that idea that it's not a zero-sum game. Making liberty more appealing to more people is better for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agreed. And yeah, and that makes lots of sense. And boy, do I love that Oscar Wilde line. That's I got to remember that. I'm a big fan.
I love him.
Yeah, he's amazing. Was amazing. And so I guess, how do you feel? Again, you're your interest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I mean, do you feel that this really helps? I mean, certainly Bitcoin is a liberating force in and of itself. But do you think there's any particulars to Bitcoin that really helps out with the message you're trying to put out there and the outreach you're trying to do?
Bitcoin's interesting because it's kind of the same problem. It's also overwhelmingly made up of straight, well-educated, upper middle class white men, but it's also it doesn't concern. Whereas the politics of the movement, we've as a movement had more of an emphasis on, for instance, taxes than sodomy laws, right? Even though,
right,
that's morally dubious. With Bitcoin, you don't have those kinds of issues. Bitcoin is Bitcoin no matter who's dealing with it. And so I think that's really exciting. Another thing that's really exciting is that whereas with tax policy, it's about, who implements it and who benefits from it. What Bitcoin to me has the promise of doing is offering services such as credit and lending and banking and property rights protection without the state. And the people who will be most quickly benefited by that are people at the bottom, the people who've traditionally been locked out of banking, the people who have traditionally been discriminated against as far as credit goes, the people who cannot get justice in the current system. And so for that reason, I think Bitcoin is really exciting as far as, even if it doesn't appeal to people in that kind of situation right now, it holds a lot of promise for them.
That is a great point. I had actually not really considered that aspect of what Bitcoin can do and what cryptocurrencies in general can do. That's phenomenal. Yeah, I agree. And I hope that is how it works out. Like you said, Bitcoin does have the similar demographics, but fortunately, I guess if more people can say, hey, this can help out everybody, that would be pretty powerful. So, okay, I want to shift gears a little bit on that. As far as, because of course Bitcoin's the big one, that's the cryptocurrency that everybody really seems to kind of have their eyes on. Are there any other cryptocurrencies though? I like to, especially on Sovryn Tech or on other shows I appear, I really like to highlight some of these other cryptocurrencies that are out there, because I think some of them, while they don't hold the same worth that Bitcoin does, they definitely, some of them have a feature set that I think may even be superior to what Bitcoin offers, or just there's some really intriguing things about them, and no one really spends the time to highlight these things, and so I like to do so. So I want to know, are there any other cryptocurrencies, or what is commonly called altcoins? Are there any other altcoins that you're interested in, that personally or in other ways?
I just got my first little bit of Dogecoin. Which
the Doge.
The Doge. Oh my God, you can't say no to the Doge. I did for a long time, and then I was like, why am I saying no? If Jeffrey Tucker says get some Dogecoin, get some Dogecoin. Like, geez, what are you doing?
He wouldn't steer you wrong.
He doesn't, no. And I was a fool for not doing what he told me to do in the beginning. I would be much wealthier now if I had. So I got some Dogecoin. I'm really excited about Dogecoin because, again, the marketing aspect. I think it's really brilliant to attach yourself to something that people are already interested in and talking about, which is the Doge meme.
Which is all over the place. So
exactly.
yeah, it is good marketing.
And it's just ridiculous.
I've never heard of it before, Dogecoin.
The Doge?
I mean, maybe I'm a square, but I've never seen it before. It's a cute dog. I mean, but I just never heard of it before.
I thought it was just taking the syntax and describing things that way. It's just so funny to me.
Yeah.
I just love it.
Such wow.
But okay, so I think, that's brilliant. The funny is brilliant, but what's more brilliant is the charity aspect to it. That it's aimed at the good.
What charity aspect? I totally thought that was just a joke.
No, like people are using it to donate to charity and raising money for things. As far as I know. Yes, as far as I know.
Okay, I saw this Jamaican bobsled thing, and that was obviously a total joke. That was Cool Runnings.
There's I think there's a animal charity that's taking, or they're raising money for animals or something like that. But I might have misunderstood.
Well, it is interesting. I mean, some of these altcoins are. I mean, Stephanie, you do work with Freenode.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Freenode just started to accept altcoins. We had this policy, like we are a charitable organization that our volunteers provide first aid on a volunteer basis at different events, and we do health and safety education and outreach and that kind of thing. And before we went all Bitcoin in about a year ago, we accepted dollars, but also other like alternative currencies. We would take silver, copper, even gold if people wanted to give that to us. I don't think anyone gave us gold, but we did get lots of different silver rounds and copper rounds and things like that. And of course, fiat money. And I think we even got like Canadian fiat money too, and we accepted that. So after we went all Bitcoin, we said, well, like if we're going to accept all these different kinds of currency, like we really can't turn down donations of altcoins. So we started accepting altcoins, and like the day we did, we got like half a Bitcoin worth of different altcoins and like a whole variety of different ones too, which was really, really cool. So, yeah, I mean, for charities, if they can handle administrating all the different accounts, which is getting easier with Cryptsy, if you want to do that, go for it. Don't turn down any kind of donations, right? If people want to donate Doge, let them do it.
And Freenode recently took Quark Coin, right?
Yeah, actually, it kind of started because like the Quark Coin community, which honestly was an altcoin that I didn't really have a very high opinion of.
Don't worry, I still don't. But that's...
Yeah, I just don't really understand like what 9 proof of work algorithms or something something like that. But anyway, so that they had contacted us and said, "Hey, we raised 1,000 Quark for you. Would you like to accept it? And all you have to do to claim it is just, post a Quark address." And so we did. And then we said, well, why don't we open it up to other altcoins too? And we did. And that's when we got all these donations coming in different altcoins. So that was really cool.
Yeah. So that kind of proves your point, Cathy. I mean, that these things can be used to raise money for incredible charities, organizations, whichever.
I always like that because, sorry, Cathy, I'll let you continue in a minute, but I always like it because when politicians try to regulate Bitcoin, you can then say to them, look, you're going to be shutting down all these charities and look at all the great things they're doing with these cryptocurrencies. Do you really want to stop them?
Absolutely. Right. And it's wonderful to have those concrete examples to point to, but it's a battle for hearts. And so I think if the general population, 1 in 10 people knows about what Bitcoin even is, but if the first introduction to Bitcoin is, hey, this is a tool for good, this is a tool that we're going to extend credit to more people, that we're going to provide better protection of property rights, that we're going to make donating to charity easier versus, this is a weird algorithm where techno nerds can get richer. That it's a big difference. And I think it's really important that, when we're talking about Bitcoin and we're marketing it, that we keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. So all right, back to the question quick. So Dogecoin, are there any other ones that have come across your path?
Taki, is that how you say it? Taki coin?
Oh, TK.
Oh, TK. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yes. So now, like within the last couple of weeks, every celebrity is making their own altcoin, including George Takei, Max Kaiser, Ron Paul has a coin.
Yeah.
Ron Paul has a coin? I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, it's weird because there's only like 21,000 or something. Like he wants to make it really rare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well.
So I think that's cool because it's, again, whereas Ron Paul, and Max Kaiser, there's a little bit more overlap, with Takei, then that's a totally new audience for cryptocurrency.
Sure.
And again, it connects to the funny thing. I think people love to laugh. People love to be amused. And so associating it with that, I think, is a really good marketing move.
Do you think you would ever make Cathy coin?
Hell yeah.
Awesome.
I know. If I could figure out how to do it, I would make Stephanie coin like yesterday. I just think that's so cool.
Yeah.
I would heavily invest in both. That's great.
The problem is, most of these people who are making celebrity coins, they don't have a clue what they're doing. So the coin is probably kind of vulnerable to attacks, especially if it's doing proof of work mining. So there are companies that are coming out that are kind of helping people make their own coins. And I think it's really going to become popular for celebrities and companies to have their own coins. And, basically they could do IPOs that way by people buying in.
Sure.
And getting their coin, and then the coin goes up in value over time with the value of the company. It's totally like a stock, except you don't have to worry about the SEC or anything. So absolutely. I think that's a great solution.
It's wonderful. I mean, I love the idea that, these people who, love to find things before they hit, instead of just saying like, oh, I listened to that band first, I invested in that band. I made it possible for that band to release an album. And now that they were superstars, I'm seeing some actual monetary benefit from it. I think that's brilliant. I think it will hit the mainstream, and I can't wait.
All right. You hear that, Brian? Sovryn coin. Get on it. You have to do it before it's cool. It's getting to the point where it's almost getting cool. So get on it right now.
Let me know. I want to be one of the first investors.
Right on. This is going to be huge. All right, fine. I'm going to do it. No. All right. Well, Cathy, I think I've taken plenty of your time here. I really, really appreciate you being on.
I have one more question for Cathy.
Please, go for it.
Okay, I'm not trying to be creepy. I'm just genuinely curious. Cathy, do you like girls?
I love women.
Okay, do you like them in a sexual way?
I describe myself as heteroflexible.
Okay, cool. I was just curious about that.
Cool. Okay. Go ahead, Cathy.
Oh, I would just say call me. But yeah, this was so amazing. I had the best time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being on. I've wanted you on for a while. I featured sexinthestate.com a while back on Sovereign Tech because I was just so excited to see another Liberty blog out there with a bit of what I would describe as a libertine flavor maybe to it, or at least something where it's okay. We're positive and we understand what's going on. It was really, really, really inspirational to find. And so I'm really glad to have you on, Cathy. Thank you so much again.
Kindred spirits, definitely.
That's right. And if you want to give out, really your best URLs where people can find you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I'm at sexinthestate.com, which is where I publish most of my stuff. Then I also have cathyreisenwitz.com, which just kind of has like my bios and my videos, and this podcast will be going up there, of course. And then I'm on Twitter way too much, at Cathy Reisenwitz. It's CathyReisenwitz. And friend me on Facebook, facebook.com/Cathy Reisenwitz.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for being on. Carpe Lucem, everybody. I will see you next week. You've been listening to Sovereign Tech.
This has been Sovereign Tech. Visit us at sovryntech.com. That's Sovryn tech.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.